Sometimes you don't realize the value of peace until the storm you created becomes your only company. There's always a moment they never see coming, a moment that creeps up quietly, like regret sliding under the door at midnight. It doesn't knock, it doesn't announce itself, it just sits there, waiting for the world to slow down, for the distractions to die out, for the noise to fade into silence. And in that silence, boom, it hits, the weight of what they lost, not just someone they used to talk to, but someone who used to center them. This is the moment they wish they never let you go. Hey folks, imagine this. You were once like a lighthouse to them, steady, still, unshaken. They were the ship, caught up in storms, looking for land, for guidance, for calm. And there you were, glowing, strong, present. But they didn't appreciate it. They thought the lighthouse would always be there, no matter how many times they sailed away. So they drifted. They wandered off into the fog, chasing excitement, noise, validation. And now they're out there, lost. And that steady light they took for granted is nowhere to be found. That's you. My friends, here's the truth they never wanted to admit. They didn't lose you when you walked away. They lost you the moment they stopped seeing your value, the moment they mistook your patience for passivity, your calm for lack of passion, your emotional discipline for distance. That's the lie, isn't it? They told themselves, you'll always be there. But a Stoic soul doesn't stay where they're not respected. You didn't leave out of anger. You left out of clarity. You stopped auditioning for a role in someone else's chaos. You chose peace, and that shook them. You see, people don't regret losing access to noise. They regret losing access to stillness, to truth, to the kind of presence that didn't need to scream to be felt. It's like that moment when the party ends, the guests leave, the music stops, and the silence is deafening. That's when your absence hits them hardest. You were the calm after their chaos, the mirror that didn't judge, but reflected something real. And when you stopped showing up, that mirror disappeared. And so did the version of themselves they actually liked. They might be out there pretending, laughing, posting, entertaining the crowd. But behind the performance, there's a quiet ache building. Because no one else is you. No one else speaks without words. No one else has that same grounded energy that made them feel safe just by being around. Folks, let me be real with you. Your silence became their loudest teacher. And I know some of you have wondered, will they ever get it? Will they ever realize what they had? The answer is yes. But not in the way you think, not through a grand apology or a dramatic return. No, they realize it in the silence, in their reflection, in the contrast between who you were and who they're surrounded by now. So don't question your growth. Don't regret your detachment, because your peace was never a punishment, it was a lesson, and whether they admit it or not, they're learning it now, quietly, painfully, fully. Remember this, my friends, when you rise in silence, you become unforgettable. So drop this in the comments if you feel it. Silence became my strength. I want to see it. Type it below and let the world know your peace is louder than your pain. And while you're at it, hit that like button, subscribe for more fire like this, and stay with me, because what's coming next, it's gonna shift your whole perspective. Number 1, the silence that hits harder than words. It is not the absence of noise that breaks them, it's the presence of meaning they ignored. There comes a time when your silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of a truth they can no longer avoid. You're no longer reaching out, no longer checking in, no longer orbiting their world hoping for breadcrumbs. And that, my friends, is when the echo begins. It's not loud, but it's deep. It doesn't scream, but it stings, because now they're realizing something most people are too late to understand. Some silences carry the weight of every word you never said, and every action they took for granted. Imagine this. You were once like a fire in the middle of winter, quiet, glowing, steady, not demanding attention, not chasing validation. You just existed, warm, grounded. And they sat near that fire, basked in its warmth, took it in, but over time, they drifted. Maybe they thought the fire would always burn. Maybe they thought you'd always stay lit no matter how cold they acted. But you didn't. You dimmed, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You stopped feeding a flame for someone who only showed up when they were cold. Now, that fire is gone. And suddenly, the silence feels like ice. That's when it starts to hit them. They might scroll through their phone late at night, stare at old messages, wonder why your name no longer pops up. They'll think, did I miss something? Were there signs? But there were no warnings. You didn't slam a door. You didn't throw words. You simply stopped explaining your worth to someone who never understood it in the first place. That's the part that's hard to swallow, right? The part that flips their world upside down. Because here's what no one wants to admit. They weren't expecting you to go silent. They expected emotional reactions. They expected you to get loud, to demand closure, to chase. That's the script most people follow. But not you. You rewrote the story. You walked away without the drama, and in doing so, you took your power back. And now, they're left trying to translate that silence, trying to understand a language they never bothered to learn, the language of emotional strength. Because when you don't speak, it forces them to sit with what they've done. It forces them to ask the questions they avoided when you were still talking, still available, still forgiving. You ever wonder why they suddenly seem more curious, more reactive, more present after you disappear? It's because your presence was never just about being seen. It was about being felt. And your silence now. Oh, it's being felt. In every quiet scroll, in every unanswered moment, in every realization that you didn't walk away to get attention. You walked away to protect your peace. And folks, let's break the biggest lie right here. The lie that says, if I stay silent, I'll be forgotten. No, you're not forgotten. You're echoing. Your stillness is louder than any performance could be. Your absence is a mirror, and what it reflects back to them is the version of themselves that didn't show up when it mattered. But it's not easy, is it? Walking away without closure. Staying quiet when your heart wanted to scream. Choosing dignity over drama. That's the hard part. That's the storm you had to sit through alone. But look at you now. You didn't just survive the silence, you became it. You let your silence do the talking. And what it's saying now is everything they never expected to hear. Because in this moment, the moment they wish they never let you go, it's not your voice that haunts them. It's your growth, your restraint, your refusal to be pulled back into chaos just because it was familiar. That's what burns. That's what lingers. So to anyone listening who's felt that shift, who's walked away quietly, not to hurt them, but to heal yourself, I see you. Your silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's strength, and it's shaking everything they thought they controlled. If that speaks to you, drop this in the comments right now. My silence speaks volumes. Say it loud in the quiet. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world around you that this isn't just about walking away. It's about walking upward. And stay with me, because what's coming next? We're going deeper into the moment they start to question everything and realize they didn't just lose a person, they lost their peace. Number 2, when the world around them gets louder, but feels colder. In the pursuit of noise, they forgot the warmth of peace, and by the time they remembered, the silence had already closed the door. Here's what nobody talks about. When they let you go, they don't feel the loss immediately. No. At first, they feel free. They feel distracted, busy, entertained. They dive headfirst into the world. Parties, new people, louder environments, brighter lights. It's all a cover-up, a fast-paced parade of motion meant to convince themselves they made the right choice, that letting you go wasn't a mistake, that they've upgraded, that they're thriving. But there's a moment, a quiet, creeping moment that always shows up eventually, when the music dies down, when the drinks don't hit the same, when the faces around them feel familiar but not comforting. That's when the cold sets in. Not a physical cold, but the kind of cold that sneaks into the soul, a chill that no party can fix, no phone notification can warm, and no compliment can cover up. They look around, and everything feels louder. The world is noisier, fuller, more stimulating, but emptier, because it's not about the number of people, it's about the quality of presence. And your presence, it wasn't loud, it was grounding. It was quiet strength, steady reassurance. You didn't need to perform to be felt. You didn't have to raise your voice to lead. And now, in a world filled with people trying to be seen, your absence is the only thing they can't unfeel. It starts to dawn on them. Maybe the calm you brought wasn't boring, it was rare. Maybe your stillness wasn't indifference, it was discipline. Maybe, just maybe, they gave up something real for something that only looks good in pictures. Think about this, my friends. You weren't the chaos, you were the anchor. You didn't add to the storm, they did. You were the quiet harbor they could always return to, but they were too caught up chasing waves to appreciate the shore. And now they're surrounded by waves that keep crashing, and no one's offering them calm anymore. They might smile in photos, laugh in videos, seem like they're doing better than ever. But don't be fooled. What they miss isn't something flashy. It's not the texts or calls or daily check-ins. It's the energy, that rare, grounded, non-anxious presence you carried with you, that quiet confidence that couldn't be shaken by games or moods, that emotional depth that didn't need validation to exist. The lie they believed? That louder means better, that more attention equals more connection. But what they've learned in your absence is this. Attention is everywhere, but presence is rare. Compliments are easy, but being understood, being seen without having to perform, that's something they lost when they lost you. And now, every noise reminds them of what they gave up. Every party feels just a little too empty. Every new person falls a little too short, because no one else brings what you brought, peace in the middle of the storm. And I want you to hear this loud and clear. It wasn't your job to stay where your presence was undervalued. It wasn't your role to keep giving calm to someone who craved chaos. You didn't walk away to hurt them. You walked away because you finally realized your peace mattered more than their approval. You see, when you let go of people who need noise to feel alive, you give yourself permission to find meaning in silence. You stop competing. You stop over-explaining. You become the version of yourself who doesn't need a room to recognize your worth, because your presence speaks for itself, even in your absence. And now, while they chase volume, you embody value. While they seek attention, you build alignment. That's the difference. That's the transformation. So if you've ever felt like your calm was mistaken for weakness, if you've ever been replaced by something louder, only for them to realize later that the silence you left behind had more weight than all the noise they ran toward. Then type this in the comments right now: peace over performance. Let it be known. Let it be felt. Let it be seen. Because what's coming next, folks? That's when they realize you're not just gone. You've grown. And that kind of realization doesn't just sting, it haunts. Stay with me. Number 3, when their power stops working and they know it. You don't lose power when someone stops responding to you. You realize you never had any. It was borrowed from their willingness to care. There's a moment that hits harder than silence. It's the moment when the old tricks don't work anymore. When they post that story, craft that caption, throw that subtle bait out into the world, and nothing happens. No reaction, no message, no orbit, just stillness. The same stillness they once mistook for weakness now becomes the mirror reflecting their loss of control. At first, they were confident. They thought they could keep you emotionally attached without actually being present. A like here, a view there, a breadcrumb dropped just often enough to keep your hope alive. They believed they could pull your attention like a lever whenever they wanted. And honestly, maybe for a while it worked. You responded, you reached, you stayed available, waiting for something real to return from something inconsistent. But now, the string they used to tug doesn't pull anything. It just hangs there, slack, lifeless, disconnected, because you're no longer on the other end of it. That's the shift they weren't ready for. That's the moment they realize the game is over. Not because someone won, but because you left the field entirely. And folks, let's be honest, this is what confuses them the most. Not the silence, not even your growth, but the fact that they no longer have influence over your emotions. The power they thought was theirs. It was always yours. You allowed it, you offered it. You showed up, hoping they'd match that energy, but they didn't. They mistook access for ownership. And now that access has been revoked, not with anger, but with clarity. Let's use a metaphor, my friends. Imagine a light switch. For months they flicked it on and off, testing your reactions, watching how quickly you'd light up. One text, and you were there. One memory shared, and you responded. They controlled the switch, or so they thought. But what they never realized is that you were the power source all along. And now, you cut the wire. The switch doesn't work. And they're standing there in the dark, flipping something that no longer responds. This is where the panic sets in. This is where the confusion grows. They start to wonder, did I lose my touch? Why aren't they reacting? Why does it feel like I'm the only one wondering now? Because for the first time, they're the ones stuck in uncertainty, and you're the one rooted in peace. It flips the dynamic. And nothing disrupts the ego more than losing control of someone who used to care deeply. Now here comes the lie they told themselves, and maybe you believed it too. If I stop reacting, they'll forget me. But the truth? Detachment doesn't erase your value. It reveals it. You're not absent. You're unavailable to manipulation. And that difference, it hits hard. Because now your silence isn't passive. It's powerful. It's intentional. It's a quiet boundary that says, I don't play those games anymore. They'll test it. Oh, trust me, they'll test it. A new story designed to provoke a memory. A post about growth, about moving on. Something cryptic, something obvious, something meant for your eyes. But your lack of response? It screams maturity. It screams, you no longer have access to my emotional rhythm. And let me remind you of something Epictetus said. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. That includes their bait, their validation, their attempts to reclaim the upper hand. You don't need to win a power struggle, because the real power was walking away from it altogether. So now they sit there, trying to figure out where it all went. The power, the attention, the sway, and it dawns on them. It disappeared when you stopped giving them your energy for free. You're not bitter, you're not hiding, you're just done. And being done, truly done, isn't loud. It's liberating. So if you've felt this shift, if you've watched someone try to pull you back into their orbit only to realize they no longer have gravity over you, drop this in the comments right now. I reclaimed my power. Say it loud in the silence. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. Because next, we're going deeper into what happens when they realize the new attention they chased. It doesn't measure up to the presence they let go. Stay with me. Number 4, when the new attention doesn't measure up. They didn't miss you right away. They had to taste the world first, to realize not all attention feels like being seen. At first, they didn't flinch. When you fell silent, they filled the gap with noise. New names, new faces, new distractions. They weren't mourning your absence, they were masking it. They thought replacing you would be as simple as refreshing a page, restarting a conversation, or posting the right picture with the right caption. They believed that if someone new liked them, validated them, praised them, it would make them forget what they walked away from. But here's the thing, my friends. Attention doesn't equal connection. Validation doesn't equal value. And compliments can't cover up the cracks that only real presence once held together. In the beginning, it might have looked like they were doing just fine, laughing in stories, surrounded by people, drenched in compliments. But that high, it fades fast, because no matter how many hearts hit their notifications, it's not the same as the calm that used to walk into the room without saying a word. They're realizing now, you didn't just give them attention, you gave them intention. You see, the new people might talk more, message more, chase harder, but it's all surface. It's spark without fire. It's sugar without substance. You weren't loud, but you were deep. You didn't flood their phone, you anchored their mind. That's the difference. That's what can't be faked or replaced. Because anyone can give attention, but very few can offer presence. And you were present, fully, quietly, consistently. Let me paint it for you. Imagine they're standing in a room full of mirrors, each one reflecting an image they want the world to see. Compliment after compliment, joke after joke, post after post. But none of them reflect who they truly are, because none of those people see beneath the mask. And suddenly, they miss the one person who did, the one who didn't just admire their highlight reel, but held space for their shadows. Now the laughter feels hollow, the attention feels forced. The excitement is there, but it doesn't last. Because what they really miss is that steady presence that didn't demand anything, yet somehow made them feel more themselves than anyone else ever did. That's you. But here's the kicker. They won't admit this. Not at first. Maybe not ever. Because to admit it is to confess that they traded something real for something loud, that they walked away from peace to chase popularity, that they gave up a connection built on emotional depth for a carousel of surface-level validation. And maybe right now, they're still pretending, still laughing louder, living faster, performing better. But late at night, when the noise settles, when the audience leaves, when the spotlight fades, that's when it creeps in. The ache, the contrast, the realization that while others reached for them, you reached into them. And now that kind of connection feels rare. because it is. And folks, that's the lie you need to stop believing, that you're easily replaced. You're not. You weren't just another person in their inbox. You were a presence that made them feel seen, a calm they didn't understand until the chaos returned, a reflection of who they could have been if they had risen to meet you instead of running from themselves. They tried to replace presence with popularity. But popularity doesn't hold you at your worst. It doesn't guide you through emotional storms. It doesn't show up with silence that speaks louder than 100 compliments. So don't let their temporary high make you question your permanent value. Don't confuse their noise for healing, because trust me, they're not comparing you to anyone out loud, but they're comparing in the quiet, in the cracks between conversations, in the still moments where no one's watching and nothing feels fulfilling. And that's where you live now, not in their feed, but in their mind. Not as a person they forgot, but as a presence they can't unfeel. So if you've ever felt like you were swapped out, left behind, replaced by something flashier, remember this: what's real doesn't compete. It endures. Drop this in the comments if you feel it. They can't replace presence. Say it for yourself. Say it for anyone who forgot your worth. Say it to remind the world that loud doesn't mean lasting. And stay with me, because next we're diving into what happens when your growth becomes impossible to ignore, and they see what they lost isn't coming back the same. Number 5. When your growth becomes impossible to ignore. They didn't think twice about losing you until they saw what you became without them. Growth hits different when it's done in silence, when you don't announce it, when you don't post about it, when you don't chase them to see it. You just become, quietly, steadily, fully, and then one day they see it. Maybe they hear about you through someone else. Maybe they scroll and stumble upon a photo, a post, a moment that shows you're not the same. And suddenly, the person they thought would always stay small, waiting, hoping, orbiting, has outgrown the space they left you in. My friends, this is the shift they never expected. They thought you'd stay stuck in that chapter, rereading the pain, waiting for a plot twist that brought them back. But you didn't wait. You wrote a new story, a story where your peace became non-negotiable, a story where your value no longer needed their recognition to exist. And now they're not just looking at a person they once knew, they're looking at a version of you they never imagined they'd lose access to. Imagine a tree once planted in the shadows, small, quiet, unseen. And now? It's standing tall, rooted in stillness, reaching higher than ever. That's you. And they can't help but notice. Not because you rubbed it in their face, but because your glow is now undeniable. It radiates, even when you're silent, even when you're gone. They remember the version of you that tried, the one that over-explained, over-gave, over-cared. But now you move different. You speak less, but everything you do says more. There's a calm in you now, a self-respect that can't be touched by their opinion anymore. And that, my friends, is power. Not loud, not boastful, but magnetic, unmistakable. And let's be honest, they didn't see it coming. They assumed your silence meant sadness, that your distance meant defeat. But that's the lie we're here to break. Your silence was never a sign of weakness. It was a sign that you were rebuilding. That while they were seeking comfort in distractions, you were finding strength in discomfort. While they chased new attention, you chased alignment. While they stayed loud, you got focused. And now they can't scroll in peace, because your growth shows up everywhere, not just on social media, but in the energy you carry, in the way people speak about you, in the way you carry yourself without needing to be seen. They let go of one version of you, and now they're haunted by the reality that they'll never meet this version again. Not like before, not with the same access, not with the same power. Because you didn't just change, you evolved. You didn't just move on, you moved up. This is what Stoicism teaches us, not to be unaffected, but to be unshakable. To stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, what can I build in their absence? And you built something beautiful. You, your peace, your purpose, your path. And here's the most poetic part. They lost you because they couldn't see your worth then. And now, they're watching your worth grow in places they can't reach anymore. You didn't grow to prove them wrong. You grew to prove to yourself that you were never meant to stay in places that made you shrink. Now, they watch from afar, maybe silently, maybe secretly, maybe even pretending it doesn't affect them. But it does, because what you've become isn't just attractive, it's untouchable. Not because you're cruel, not because you're arrogant, but because your peace no longer depends on being understood by people who never tried. And this right here, this is the part where they wish they never let you go. Not just because they miss you, but because they realize the best version of you arrived after they left. And that version isn't going back. So if you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, underestimated, and you chose growth anyway, drop this in the comments. My evolution is my revenge. Let it be known. Let it be felt. Let it echo. Because your growth doesn't need validation. It just needs space. And stay with me, because next, we're going deeper into the memory they can't escape, the one that doesn't fade, because it was never just about what you said. It was about how you made them feel. Number 6. When the memory of you doesn't fade. They won't remember every word you said, but they'll never forget how your presence made them feel safe in a world that only knows how to scream. There's something powerful about a memory that was never loud to begin with. It's the kind that lingers, not because it demanded attention, but because it gave something the world rarely offers: stillness. You see, my friends, most people forget those who chased them. They forget the ones who tried too hard to be seen. But they never forget the ones who made them feel deeply without trying. And that's exactly who you were. At first, they might have believed you were just a phase, just another chapter, something they'd outgrow, get over, move on from. But what they didn't realize is, you weren't a moment. You were a mirror. You weren't noise. You were a presence. You didn't come into their life to perform. You came to anchor. And that kind of presence doesn't vanish with distance. It echoes. It shows up in unexpected ways, in conversations that suddenly fall flat, in moments of chaos where your calm is now painfully missing, in new connections that are loud but never steady. They try to focus, to stay distracted, but the memory of how you moved, how you responded, how you simply were, keeps returning. You didn't yell, you didn't chase, you didn't compete. And yet, you're the one they can't forget. Why? Because emotional discipline leaves fingerprints that time can't wipe away. Because your silence, your strength, your refusal to react like everyone else, that's not something easily replaced. That's not something easily ignored. That's the kind of memory that shows up in the quietest hours, whispering truths they're not ready to face. Let's make it real. Picture a crowded room, music, laughter, distractions everywhere. But for some reason, their mind keeps drifting to you, not because of anything dramatic, but because you once created a peace inside them that no one else has been able to recreate. That's when the ache starts. That's when the regret creeps in. They remember the way you didn't flinch in conflict, the way you didn't raise your voice to be heard, the way you stayed calm when they tried to provoke chaos. They remember how they felt understood, not because you solved their problems, but because you listened without judgment. You didn't try to fix them. You gave them space to grow. That's what's missing now. And here's the hardest part for them to accept. You weren't just someone they spent time with. You were someone who changed how they viewed themselves. Around you, they thought deeper, spoke softer, moved with more purpose. Not because you told them to, but because your energy made it feel natural to rise. Now, that mirror is gone, and the version of themselves that only existed in your presence, it's fading. They're left chasing attention, not alignment, surrounded by people who react, not respond. And slowly, they're realizing, maybe the connection they had with you wasn't just different, it was sacred. You see, most people think being unforgettable means being dramatic, being flashy, being loud. But Stoicism teaches something else entirely. As Marcus Aurelius said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's what you did. You became the example, not the argument. You didn't push to be remembered. You lived in a way that couldn't be forgotten. And now they carry that memory like a quiet ache. They might not talk about it. They might pretend they've moved on. But it lingers in the pause between conversations, in the stillness before they sleep, in the comparison they make without meaning to. You became the standard, not through force, but through consistency. So don't ever think you were forgettable just because they acted like it at first. The ones who create the deepest peace are rarely appreciated in real time, but they're the ones who echo longest after they're gone. If you've ever felt like your presence wasn't loud enough to be remembered, drop this in the comments right now. I leave a silent mark. Say it to remind yourself. Say it to show the world. Say it for those who didn't see it until it was too late. And stay with me. Because what's coming next is the truth they didn't want to see. The realization that you weren't just someone they lost. You were the mirror that made them better. Number 7. When they realize you were the mirror. You didn't force them to grow, you inspired it. And now that you're gone, the version of themselves they were becoming vanished with you. It's one thing to lose a person, it's another thing entirely to lose the version of yourself that only existed around that person. And my friends, that's exactly what's haunting them now. You weren't just a relationship. You weren't just a memory. You were a mirror, a reflection of everything they could have become, but didn't. See, they didn't notice it at first. They were too wrapped up in the game, in the ego, in the belief that they held the upper hand. They thought your presence was nice, but replaceable. Your energy, comforting, but common. But you were never common. You were the rare type of soul that doesn't try to change people. You just live in alignment, and that alignment pulls others up. And when they were around you, something shifted inside them. Slowly, quietly, without pressure. They spoke more intentionally. They made fewer excuses. They carried themselves with more care. Because your presence didn't just bring calm, it brought clarity. You didn't fix them. No, you didn't need to. You held the line. You became the silent example of what discipline looked like, of what self-respect looked like, of what living by values, not emotions, actually feels like. And that did something to them. They may not have admitted it then, but they felt it. You didn't tell them to be better, you just were. You didn't preach standards, you embodied them. You didn't beg them to rise, you simply rose and left the door open. But they weren't ready. They thought the mirror would always be there, that they could come and go, grow and regress, and you'd still reflect back a version of themselves that felt grounded and capable. But when you finally walked away, not in anger, but in full peace, that mirror shattered. And now they can't find that version of themselves anymore. Because here's the truth most people don't realize until it's too late. We don't just miss people, we miss who we were when we were with them. And what they miss now isn't just you, it's the clarity they felt when they looked at themselves through your eyes, the peace they had in your presence, the ambition they started to feel when they watched how you moved. That kind of influence can't be faked. That kind of guidance doesn't come with a lecture. It comes with example. You were the example, a Stoic in motion, calm but not passive, still but not stagnant, grounded but never controlling, and in your steadiness they saw what they could have been if they had matched that energy instead of resisting it. But now you're gone. The mirror is gone, and so is the version of themselves they actually liked. And trust me, folks, that burns more than any silence ever could, because now they're surrounded by noise, by chaos, by shallow conversations and loud personalities that all feel the same. No one holds them accountable. No one holds a higher standard. No one makes them reflect. And for the first time, they feel it. That uncomfortable truth. You weren't trying to fix them. You were just showing them what healed looks like. You see, healing energy isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be noticed. But once you've felt it, everything else feels off. And now they're stuck. Not because they can't find someone new, but because they can't find someone who makes them feel like they're becoming someone new. They didn't just lose love. They lost growth. They lost a reflection. They lost a presence that never needed control to lead. And that, my friends, is what lingers. Not your words, not even the good times, but the version of themselves that only existed beside your stillness. So, if you've ever walked away, not to hurt them, but because you realized they weren't rising with you, write this in the comments. I was the mirror. Say it proudly. Say it with peace, because you didn't lose anything by leaving. You gave them a gift they didn't recognize until it was gone. And stay with me, because next, we're going deeper into the line they thought was a rejection, but was actually your boundary. And now, that line is the only thing they wish they had respected. Number 8. When your boundaries finally make sense. They thought your standards were walls. Now they realize they were doors, and they just didn't have the courage to walk through. There was a time when they called you cold, too distant, too disciplined. You're too much, they said, or worse, you don't feel anything. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't see back then, was that your distance wasn't detachment, it was direction. Your silence wasn't indifference, it was self-control. Your standards weren't meant to keep them out. They were there to protect the peace you fought like hell to build. But folks, let's be real. When you're the calm one in the middle of chaos, you get misunderstood. When you walk away from drama instead of dancing in it, they say you're heartless. When you refuse to bend to emotional manipulation, they call you selfish. And yet, what hurt them most wasn't that you were hard to move. It's that you wouldn't move for them. You drew the line, not with anger, but with principle. You didn't scream it. You didn't beg to be understood. You just stood still. And that stillness, that unnerved them. Because deep down, they were used to people folding. They were used to emotional tug-of-war, to chaos disguised as passion. But you didn't play those games. You didn't raise your voice to be heard. You simply removed yourself when the energy no longer matched your values. And now, they get it. Now, they're looking back, trying to retrace the moments. The boundaries they once saw as rejection now look like the blueprint to the peace they're desperately craving. Because, let's be honest, after you, they met others. Others who bent, others who broke, others who had no spine, no direction, no standard. And in the beginning, it felt empowering to be in control. But over time, they started to feel something strange, empty. No one challenges them to grow. No one walks away when lines are crossed. No one mirrors the kind of integrity that demands elevation. They miss that now, not the comfort, not the warmth, but the structure, the emotional order you brought into their chaos. They remember the way you disengage when conversations turned toxic, the way you never competed for attention, the way you refused to explain your worth for the 100th time. Back then, they called it arrogance. Today, it looks a lot like clarity. And now, that boundary they once resented, it's the same one they wish they respected. Because let's tell the truth here, you weren't hard to love. You were just unwilling to be loved halfway. You weren't demanding, you were disciplined, and discipline always exposes the ones who live in disorder. That's why they couldn't handle it. That's why they fumbled it. But you didn't lose by walking away. You won by not losing yourself. And if there's one thing that's become undeniably clear, it's that your peace, your patience, your presence, and yes, your boundaries, left a deeper impact than any emotional outburst ever could. That's what Stoicism teaches us. That stillness is strength. That virtue is enough. That the world might not understand your silence, but those who needed to hear it the most do now. So don't regret the lines you drew. They were never barriers. They were invitations to rise. And if they chose to walk away instead, that's on them. Because your standards weren't too high. Their effort was just too low. If you've ever been told you were too much just for holding your ground, drop this in the comments right now. My boundaries are my peace. Let the world know that protecting your energy isn't harsh, it's holy, it's necessary. It's the most loving thing you can do, for them and for you. And if this message hit home, if you've ever walked away, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself, then make sure you like this video, subscribe for more Stoic truth and strength, and share this with someone who forgot who they are just to be loved by someone who didn't deserve it. Because remember, what they once called too much will one day be everything they wish they never lost.